welcome to Living La Vita Loca podcast, a retro gaming podcast for some of your retro gaming needs. My name is Fazz.
And I've run out of jokes.
I am James Squared.
Huh? Anyway, hi. That's Rich and Haikers trying to nuke the podcast already. Like
When do we do that?
Like Duke Nukem from last week. So you don't want this to exist or something? I don't understand. Wait a minute.
Would I
what?
sabotage my own platform?
Well, you know, if you're at war, you would.
Oh, I see what you've done.
Yeah. That's...
You would not your own platform. Come on, Faz.
You never know. Like, as in, what if you? Well,
I
if
ain't
you were
buying
the,
what you're shoveling.
if you're the French Resistance, you'd have to take your own railway lines out. How about them apples and railway lines?
What?
Okay then, fine. So we are at war, clearly. So it seems. Meant to be friends. And we're going to talk about war games, but not necessarily all traditional war games.
Actual wars.
Not actual war games, no. So I don't think there's actually any real
kind of more war adjacent.
war chase.
War themed.
War themed. I mean, yeah, war themed, I guess, yeah.
Who are you if you're war adjacent? I don't really know. Like,
I don't know.
Ross Kemp? Maybe?
Actually, yeah, that would kind of make sense. Yeah. Andy McNabb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not bad into the beers that we're drinking, to be fair. Things that are adjacent to the things they're supposed to be about.
Yeah, these are. So, do we name them because they're not that because they're that bad? I guess you have to review everything, don't you?
Usually we say very positive things about beers and name them. I don't think we've ever said completely negative things about a beer before. If we have, it's been very rare.
Yeah.
Salt X Hooch. Guys.
Looking at you. Yeah.
Trailblazers.
Twisting my lemon, man. What? Lemon infused. Infused is the word. I wanted more lemon from that.
Yeah.
I wanted a lot more lemon.
It's the sort of homeopathic answer to infusion, which is waving a lemon vaguely over it, I
A
think.
lemon was in the room.
When you would prefer to drink an actual hooch to this, that's when you're on, in the wrong spot, I think. So, yeah, sorry, Salt. I do like Salt Brewery, and they've got like quite a few bars and stuff kicking around Leeds, and they're from Saltaire and Bingley. That's where my wife's from. So, Bingley Road.
Generally very good, but this one's a little bit of a swing and a miss.
Yeah. So, sad beers for sad
Times.
War adjacencies. Right, so shall I kick off this time? Because
Sure,
we had a different round up last time. So my war adjacencies has absolutely nothing to do with war. I don't even know why the game is called like Fair Wars, but it is Crazy Taxi Fair Wars on the PSP from 2007.
Hang on, you don't know why it's called Fair Wars?
Can I get a spell check on fair, please?
I mean, I know what a fair is.
No, but there was nothing in the game to give you a hint as to why it was called Fair Wars.
No. There's
Nothing?
No, nothing.
Really?
There's no reason whatsoever for this to be called Fair Wars.
So because I've never played it, right?
Yeah,
so I was
okay.
fully expecting you to turn up and being like, oh yeah, there's this story about like a rival taxi company or something like that, and you have to get more fares.
That would be a lovely evolution of the game, wouldn't it?
Nothing. No
So-
turf war type.
Prior to the podcast,
Wow.
you sort of said, oh, maybe I should play the original Crazy Taxi.
Yeah.
And I said I wouldn't bother.
Yeah.
Now, the reason I said I wouldn't bother is because this is the original Crazy Taxi and the original Crazy Taxi 2 ported straight to the PSP with, I would say, pretty much zero difference whatsoever. There is nothing about these games that put them at war or, make them want to square off. And like you say, there is no storyline at all of any equivalent, really, that makes
That
it
is
war.
unexpected.
I don't get why it's called that at all.
Huh.
So, I mean, I'm going to ask this question at the start, and then you guys can come back round to it once I've finished my review. The question is, so Crazy Taxi is returning. Sega are going to go back through a lot of their back catalogue and make updated versions. The updated version of Crazy Taxi, from what we know of it so far, is very little, but it's supposedly going to be a MMO, massive multiplayer online game, which is
Pretty crazy.
which is a little bit crazy. Yeah,
That is insane.
So let me do my review, and then you can think if that's a good thing or not.
I think I've already decided.
I thought that might be the case, which is why I'm not necessarily going to change your opinion on that. Just maybe colour it a certain way.
Okay. All right.
He's saying shut up and let him review.
Yeah. No.
Thanks.
let him cook.
So initially, I couldn't have been less aware that this port existed.
That's because it's got a stupid title.
Yeah, I genuinely did not know at the time when I owned my PSP that there was a Crazy Taxi port for it, and that it was just a straight up port from the Dreamcast games. That is just so. Let's talk about the concept of Crazy Taxi. If you've never touched Crazy Taxi before, or you don't know anything about it, so you drive around a big city picking up passengers, and you race to get them to where they want to be. You kind of, in this version, and I guess on the console versions, I think it is, I can't remember if you are on the arcade versions or not, you're guided by a giant sat-nav arrow, almost like a weird TomTom system. TomTom still a thing? Probably not.
Yes.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh,
well,
right,
I mean, the one that I own is still going.
Oh, really? Cool. That's awesome. I thought I was like, is MySpace still a thing?
That
Is
ages
TomTom?
you.
Yeah, no. So when you drop off the passengers, so you do get paid, which is nice of them, and the money decides your mission grade. So, and you get some time added back on the clock. You get extra money if you drive dangerously, hence the Crazy Taxi situation. That's how I choose my Uber tips. The more dangerous, the more money they get paid. Crazy Taxi's taught me silly things. So Crazy Taxi 2 doesn't really have much more in terms of evolution from Crazy Taxi 1, other than it's set in a different city. So Crazy Taxi is set in a San Francisco-esque city. Crazy Taxi 2 is set in a New York-esque city, if you will. You do get multi-drop passengers in Crazy Taxi 2 and something called the Crazy Hop. I think it's probably a bit of a stretch to call it a Crazy Hop. Your car can jump, basically, and
It does sound like a regular hop.
yeah, it's just a hopping car. Everyone sees them all the time. I guess the idea was almost that it was like, oh, you're in New York now, so therefore there's going to be more traffic, and therefore you need to jump over it. Yet the game isn't any more dense with traffic, to be perfectly honest. So I don't really understand why that was put in there as a concept. But anyway, crazy. So that's kind of Crazy Taxi in a nutshell. I've never really played Crazy Taxi on a home console before. I've only really played the arcade version, which the one I've played is like a standing up version where you have an accelerator pedal to press and you kind of stand against a bar and you have the steering wheel in front of you. You almost get a bit more of a feel for driving a taxi in an absolutely insane way from that. Almost like my little boy, he drives a crazy coupe, like the little shitty cars you kind of get as a kid that is, and you get in them and then they run other children over at soft play centres. That's what it felt like when you're doing that on the actual arcade. Whereas the console port it just feels a bit more of a just a weaker offering, if you will.
Mm.
What are you going to say about Crazy Taxi from the console versions that you can remember?
I think the overarching thing for me is the soundtrack. So if I remember rightly, there was a lot of, say, like The Offspring on the original soundtrack. I think that carried over to PS2, but by the time it was coming out on Xbox 360 and later, they just nixed it. I don't remember it handling particularly poorly, or I felt like I was really missing out for not having a steering wheel or anything like that. But then I've only ever played it. I probably played it on PS2 more than anything, really. So yeah.
You done much with the Haikers?
No.
No.
It was always that game in the arcade that was like, oh, that looks like quite fun.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna go over here with the light guns instead, because I was when it was most appealing to me was when I was unable to drive.
Yeah.
And I've never really picked it up on the console.
Yeah. I mean, this was my first time, like I say, on a home console and things. So, the soundtrack situation. So there's a bit of a weird twist on this with the PSP, because the exact licensed soundtrack isn't there anymore. It is still like sort of a punk rock soundtrack, and you still have The Offspring popping up. It's just not the exact same soundtrack from the first game, where you've got. But actually, when I looked at the soundtrack from the first game that people feel so fondly about and love, it's like 4 Offspring songs and 4 Bad Religion songs.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's only literally those 2 bands. That isn't. people remember that as like being the most important part of this game and stuff, and like you know, you always cited it.
Genuinely, I think it is. Like, I think for soundtracks, it's kind of like that Tony Hawk's sort of
time
neck of the woods.
What kind of era was that?
I think it was
99.
Yeah, I think it was getting towards the kind of like Ixnay on the Ombre kind of
Right. Okay. Yeah, because that was
era.
That was massive when it came out when I was in like early high school.
Yeah,
so I can see that can be formative and also only 2 bands.
So so the twist being that on the PSP you can add your own MP3 soundtrack to the game. So if you really wanted to, you could put the original soundtrack back on there while you're driving around, or put your own punk rock, whatever you like.
Johnny Cash.
Yeah, I was just about to say, what is the worst song that you think you could play? I was thinking
Enya.
No.
We should see other people.
That's why Haikers is here.
For what it's worth, my answer is It's a Small World After All.
Yeah,
that's bad. That is pretty bad.
That's good. Yeah.
Quick question though, like because I think they used to have like I don't know Pizza Huts and or KFCs or something like that in there as well. Like have they made the jump?
No, they haven't. So the licensing of all of the paraphernalia, that's
all the fun
around.
stuff.
Exactly.
All the fun stuff. Where you go to the arcade, you play Crazy Taxi, you listen to The Offspring, and you go to Pizza Hut afterwards.
Exactly.
Oh man,
Pepsi Man, you want him to run around the background? That'd be great if that was happening. Yeah. So no, not
Alas.
that. And to be honest, it felt like we were talking about in the previous podcast about how a world feels lived in and stuff, and missing those things. You can definitely tell that is in this, missing those things from the arcade version that I've played. The controls on the PSP, it's a bit weird because you don't have to, but it certainly helps you get better grades if you do the Crazy Taxi stunts. So basically, I can't remember exactly what they're called now again, but is it Crazy Dash and Shift, I think it is, and you have to fiddle with the accelerator and reverse button and gear shift to be able to do those.
Oh yeah.
So, but the PSP it's strange that is in. I think the X and circle button are used to actually change your gears, and then the R button is, and X and circle makes you go forward or backwards. It's a really weird system to be able to actually perform the Crazy Taxi stunts in inverted commas, and actually it just takes away from the game. So it almost makes you. If you want to go quickly, you have to do a Crazy Dash, which is absolutely fine. I understand that. So I will do that. But actually, when you're playing in arcade mode and you've only got 2.5 minutes to get around the city and stuff, and it's a bit of a fiddle to do that, it doesn't actually help you out by the time even if you get sort of 2 or 3 hours in of playing the same thing over and over, it still doesn't really help. I still found myself faffing around with the buttons and doing a bad job of it. There is no pure tutorial for these games, but there are some mini games that have been put into the PSP, almost like a Gran Turismo learning license situation where they're meant to teach you, I guess, really how to do the Crazy Dash and the sort of the Crazy Drift, I think it is. And but it doesn't really help. I'm going to be honest. They get really hard really quickly, and because you're faffing around those buttons and it's the first time doing it, it has that sort of feel where, like with Tony Hawk's, where you do like a medal sort of level, and it's like you've got to score like 96, so you have to get perfect to doing all the reverts and all the manuals and stuff. It gets like that, but with PSP controls, and it's difficult. And then the 2 modes really. You've got an arcade rules mode and an original rules, which I didn't really understand what the difference was. I think it was just that there's a different customer layout around the city. It doesn't ever explain. I mean, I know there would have been a manual with the game, but certainly from understanding from just being in game, I didn't really understand what the difference was. I think it was just literally there's customers stood in this place, and it's an arcade world where you do that however many times and get better and better and better and get your score better from getting more accurate with your braking and things. And then here's like effectively almost like you'd get with an old gaming console where you just change it from option A to option B. It's like, here you go, just different layout. And then you could, if you wanted to, do it on bigger time limits as well. So you could do 10 minutes of Crazy Taxi and things, and then you end up with a score. And you could, if you wanted to, put share that on the internet if you want to do that. There also is there's an ad hoc sort of thing where you can. How do I describe it? It is a multiplayer, but it's almost like, I guess this might be where the wars come in. Almost like, is in that you're meant to sort of play against each other,
Mm.
but you don't. It's kind of like separate runs almost. That is in, so you can pass your PSP to each other and
Right.
have a different go, and get a different score from each other. But I don't see how that's a war or a battle, really, particularly.
That's like calling the Olympic canoe slalom canoe wars.
Yeah,
That's-
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. Whereas with the new version, what was it where you kind of have all four of them dropping at once?
That was actually more of a
genuinely
war.
is,
Yeah. Actually, that was kayak slalom, wasn't it, or canoe slalom? Yeah.
So yeah, it's really weird. Like I don't know. Like isn't so you pass the PSP and you do get an ad hoc, but again, it's time trial versus. So yeah, it didn't really ever feel like that wall situation would be built up over the internet. I think that's possibly the only thing I can think of where they thought, oh, you're battling against somebody else, but it feels really.
But even then,
heartless.
you just do that with the arcade original because you take it in turns on
Well,
that.
it's a
too.
high score thing, isn't it?
Yeah. So
I mean, again, going back to how faithful this game is, it's really super faithful. I enjoy that all the NPCs kind of run through the buildings and stuff to try and escape you. I love that the multi-drop passengers on Crazy Taxi 2 would rather jump into traffic than finish their taxi journey with me because I took too long. Just stupid stuff like that. But I'm like, I like that. It's just like, that's still ridiculous. It's just, I really felt like the whole game, Crazy Taxi, just lacks purpose. I just kind of got bored after 2 hours. Like I was just like, if I'd have paid full price for this when it came out, I'd have been like, geez, this is, really, this is what you do. And it should be great value having two games on one disc. Yet both games are so similar to each other.
Two games, one concept. Isn't
Yeah,
it?
exactly. Yeah, and apart from you could hop your car. Like it's just.
Sorry. Yes.
Yeah, and you can pick up
one and a
more
half
passengers.
concepts.
Yeah, you can pick up more passengers at once. Which the multi-drop passenger thing, I just think it needed fleshing out. I just feel like this is the kind of arcade game. It's not. It's a completely different game. Don't get me wrong, but I'm trying to think like Outrun, for example. That is in an arcade sort of racer that has progression to it. But you do the same thing over and over, but you feel like you're progressing somewhere. Here, you just feel like you're doing the same thing over and over and getting nowhere with it. Like, as in, your grade may increase a little bit, or you're trying to get to that A grade by getting more money from your passengers. But there was nothing compelling about that to me. Like, as in, there was nothing. I didn't feel like I was being rewarded in any way for this. Whereas other arcade games where you do the same thing over and over, like in a shmup, for example, like I felt there was more reward. I don't know what that is.
You get that journey, don't you? You see a little bit more.
So there's no sort of progression or upgrades or unlocks or anything that you don't unlock a crazy taxi life or something.
No, so I mean there are you get and you can pick between. I think it's on Crazy Taxi 2 you can pick 4 different characters, but they don't do anything necessarily different. Yeah, they don't do anything necessarily different. Do you know what I mean? They've all just got like crazy hairdos. Like it's just like, it just doesn't do anything. I just didn't understand this game at all. Like, as in what I was trying to get out of it, really. Like, I don't know. Like, it just felt like at that point, Crazy Taxi must have been about 8 years old, and now this is where I'm coming back to the question I asked at the start. It felt like it really did need an evolution as a game to be something better and different, which is why I also balked when I sort of heard, oh, it's going to be an MMO and multiplayer and different. But actually, is it that much of a bad idea that it's going to be something completely different whilst trying to maintain the core mechanics of what Crazy Taxi is? Because I feel like it does need a kick in the nuts to be better.
Yeah, that's fair.
It depends what you mean by MMO, I think. Because if you're taking MMO in the way that, for example, Horizon, is it Forza Horizon?
Yeah.
That's not really an MMO, but it's sort of you're always online and you have the ability to join in races wherever you want. I can sort of see that. If it's just Crazy Taxi, except there's lots of players playing at the same time in the same universe, I sort of come back to what you're saying. It's like, what's the point?
Yeah.
What's the actual? I know there's not going to be a plot to it. It doesn't need to be a plot, but there needs to be a compelling gameplay loop more than just race to get a score dropping people off. What is the multiplayer component of that?
Yeah,
it sounds to me, or the first thing that came to mind when you said that just then about everybody basically just playing Crazy Taxi at the same time, Grand Theft Auto Online.
Yes,
like it's what it is what you've got, and I think it would be really interesting to see what they do with it, because now you've mentioned Forza Horizon as well. Yeah, I'm with you. I could see that working. But at the same time, to go back to the core Crazy Taxi thing, is there enough meat on the bones to kind of carry something like that through? And I don't
It's a side
think there
mission in
is.
Grand Theft Auto, isn't
Yeah,
it? Like,
exactly.
drop people off as quickly as you can.
Yeah.
I was so disappointed with this. I really was. I thought I was going to get a really great time, and I really, really wanted to like it because I know it feels like this is what I was trying to drive with the nostalgia sort of thing, where it feels like there's a really strong nostalgia for Crazy Taxi, but I don't think that if you go back there's a lot there at all. Really.
I think that nostalgia must be putting 50p in a machine and playing it with your mates, watching and laughing at it for the course of a run.
Yeah.
I think I think that's probably the same reason it never really appealed to me.
Yeah.
On a console.
I think that I do want to give the port its due in so much that they've done a brilliant job of taking Crazy Taxi 1 and 2 from a console, putting it on a PSP, and that is what it is. It just looks the exact same, and it's the exact same game. It's just, I don't think that game, by the time you get to 2007 from 1999, had aged very well, and now you're in 2024 playing it, it's probably even worse, to be honest. That is as a concept. And I want them to do something good with it. And if they take a swing and a miss, that is that I don't want that to be the case, but if they do, at least they're trying something different. I'd be happier with that than I would be if they just ran the same thing back again. And just went, oh, look at this, it's Crazy Taxi. So
flipping it round, how would you fix it? How would you fix Crazy Taxi?
Oh, well, I mean, I certainly think that I do think that it would be a great idea to kind of have that many...
Merge it with Duke Nukem!
Yeah. I think it is a great idea to have hundreds of people in a lobby going absolutely nuts. That is it, and having collisions and having a burnout crash mode, for example. That is in
that's an interesting idea.
That kind of thing. That would be just having your points aren't just attached to getting cash from passengers. That is in you get that, but you'll get and having way more Crazy Taxi stunts rather than just you've got a crazy dash and a crazy shift. You could have a crazy flip, whatever you want to call it. That is in they could fire fireworks out of the back of your car or something. Just. And like you say, and
the crazy Gandley.
Yeah. I'm not necessarily a massive fan of the Game Pass sort of, like the progressions that you get in games now, where you maybe get different things for your car. And
do 10 races and get a different hat.
Yeah, for example, yeah. But at least it is something, it is some progression of some kind, and more people might find that compelling than I would. But it was just like a basic Billy Bob game as it was on the PSP.
Tell you what, you mentioning Burnout Crash mode and stuff like that. Thinking of Burnout Paradise, where they would do that thing where you would have like baked in time trials, and like whoever got the fastest down a road or between a set of traffic lights, and you didn't even have to be in a race. You just had to be online for those to count. I can imagine that like longest drift challenges or things like that. They might have some bits
all
and bobs like that they could do.
Bang a great soundtrack on it. Do you know what I mean? And just have a bit more variety to it. And I think that you'll get a lot of people saying, "Oh yeah, Crazy Taxi's back," and there's just more to it.
It's crazier than ever.
Yeah. That to me, it genuinely screams free to play and pay for the cosmetics.
Doesn't it?
Yeah. So yeah, that for me, I came in with a score, and it's probably it's a 3 out of 10 actually. Now I did have it a little bit higher, but I
going in the book,
talked myself down a little bit more. Kind of sad. It's sad as the beer that we're drinking.
Let's have a moment of silence.
So, who's next on the war on the home front or the war front or whatever you want to call it? Something the war adjacent front.
War adjacent front. War themed. Novelty front. I'm talking. Shall I go?
Yeah, go for it.
I am talking.
That's my normal approach to life. So I've gone for something that's at least got a war in it, although I have a grammatical problem with the title. Which is what everybody wants to hear in their game reviews. So I've gone with the definitely not retro XCOM 2 War of the Chosen, which came out in 2017, which is an expansion pack, you will be shocked to hear, to XCOM 2, full stop, which is itself a sequel to XCOM.
I'm glad we got that cleared up.
Which is itself I don't know if it's a sequel or a spiritual successor or a remake of various other XCOM games, which are retro. So there is a thread leading back to the sort of retro games. For anyone who is unfamiliar with XCOM, it is a tactical turn-based, squad-based shooter set in the schlockiest B-movie territory you can possibly find. Aliens have invaded. You need to shoot them in the face because they're evil. That's more or less the sum of the plot. Although interestingly, that's the plot of XCOM, the first XCOM. XCOM was notoriously pretty difficult. It was unyielding is probably the better, unforgiving. If you made mistakes, it would punish you for making those mistakes, and it was turn-based, so you had time to think about them, so it would punish you and make you feel foolish because you had so long to think about it and you still chose the wrong option. So it made it quite interesting that when XCOM 2 came out, the plot of XCOM 2 is not, it's a direct sequel to what happens in XCOM. It is what happens if you played XCOM and that game was so hard that you lost and the aliens took over Earth. And now you're a few years on and you're a resistance movement.
Yeah.
XCOM 2 War of the Chosen, or Wizards of the Coast, as I keep wanting to refer to it, as the D&D player in me cannot see WOTC without thinking Wizards of the Coast and sort of shuddering slightly. So War of the Chosen is an expansion. It was DLC. It was released the year after, in 2017, the year after XCOM 2 came out, and it sort of expands the breadth of what XCOM 2 gives. It doesn't prolong it. So it gives you more stuff to play with in the same campaign. So if you played XCOM 2 for a while, you get the same schlocky B-movie plot in War of the Chosen. You are the resistance movement. You start as a ragtag bunch of gym bros who seem to have, like, they've got this amazing flying fortress, but they can only afford 20 soldiers. It's crazy. 20 soldiers with basic assault rifles. And they can, although they've got this enormous flying fortress filled with alien tech, you can only send 6 people at a time out to actually fight because you can only afford 1 Sky Ranger. That's by the by. There's a lot of this kind of like weird logic that you have to just go, yeah, okay, I guess. The game would be so much easier if you could send 12 people. That's all I'm saying. It's like if all these super soldiers could just like go one-on-one with the enemy. I don't understand how they took over Earth. I don't know how they would deal with a tank, which you don't get. I digress. So yeah, the game itself, as I say, it's a tactical squad-based shooter. It is the general shtick is you start with a bunch of rookies. You go out, and as I say, you go out kind of 4 at a time to begin with, and you get upgrades by completing missions. You complete missions by shooting enemies in the face, or not, as the case may be. And this is where so you had a question for us about Crazy Taxi. I've got a slightly more existential question for both of you, which is it okay for a video game to lie to you? Okay. And I don't mean lie to you in a sort of plot sense of like giving you a sort of like, oh, this is a baddie, and oh, we've sort of flipped the plot. I mean for it to fundamentally change the basis on which you are playing, like, or fundamentally undermine the basis on which you think the rules of the game are set.
Right.
Ooh.
I'll come back to it.
Does it benefit the gamer?
Benefits the player.
Yeah, okay. It does benefit the player.
Yeah.
Right, okay. Because I feel like if there's some sort of entertainment value in that happening, then yes, I think it's acceptable. But I'll be interested to see what happens.
I think for my part, like, I've been pleasantly surprised when, say, like, there's a mechanic that you've got to grips with over a few hours, and then the game does something to flip it on its head. And I appreciate that that's not the same as it outright lying to you.
Yeah.
But that would be the closest I could think of to it being okay.
Yeah. So this is interesting, and genuinely, it's a question that I have grappled with for reasons I will come back to. And like, I'm being a bit flippant about it, but it's genuinely something that made me move away from XCOM. Is because I learned/read, and there's still conflicting information about this from various different sources online, that the random number generator, one of the big feature in XCOM is you know what percentage chance your shots have to hit.
Right, okay.
Before you take the shot, and you can make that decision to go, okay, I'm going to take this shot, which is a 95% chance to hit, and it'll give you the damage ratio, like what damage you might do. And then you can go, okay, or you can go, no, actually, I'm going to do something else with my turn.
Yeah.
the thing that turned me off XCOM was learning that the XCOM random number generator, what you see is not what you get. The number that is there is not necessarily the number that you see. And there is conflicting information on this online. I've read elsewhere that it goes both ways. That it can, if you're having a great time, if you're doing really well, then it will make certain shots miss, or it will sort of nudge the random number generator a little bit. But it will also go the other way. And if you're having an absolutely torrid time, it will make you hit when you might have missed to sort of bring that back into balance. And I had a real problem with that when I was playing, because it was like, what's the, I can't trust what I see.
Yeah.
This feels like someone is deciding whether I hit, rather than it feeling like I'm taking a chance, an informed chance. So I actually did a little experiment when I was playing this game. And I, for one mission, which I believe was the really unfortunately, they give random names to all of the missions, really unfortunately named Operation Moist Damp. And I'm not making that up.
Well, at least you got an episode
this
title.
Is why this is why the aliens actually win. Because people are naming missions like that.
It was, and this was purely coincidental. Like, most of them are like Striking Dawn or like Burning Flame, but this one was Moist Damp.
It was never destined to go well.
Yeah. It was, and actually, I like kept the tally. I kept like, I can send you a picture of it for your socials or whatever. I got all the tally marks. And actually, the RNG was pretty much bang on. It was, that was, it was right. It was correct. And I lacked the attention span to kind of keep that up through other missions. Plus, I was like, what horrible mission name am I going to notice next? So I didn't bother with that. But it's interesting what part that sort of, even if it is just psychological, the idea that you miss, because it feels like you miss every 85% shot you take.
Okay.
It feels like there's a disproportionate number of like things that feel like they should hit that miss. And for that reason, that's when I start to get into some of my gripes with it. Because the combat, like, it's brutal. You move around, you try and take up good flanking positions, but if you mess up, you are in trouble. And there's a sort of mechanic with it where so it goes in turns. Your entire team takes your entire turn, and then the aliens take their turn. And you move. If you move to within visual range of them during your turn, the aliens will go heck, and then will like get to cover before your turn, and then on their turn they will attack. And each of your squad members has 2 moves. They can move like a short amount and still shoot, or they can like basically peg it. And the number of times that you decide with the last person, like the last squad member, never move forward with the last squad member, because you will undoubtedly encounter aliens. They will readjust, and then it is their turn, because no one else can take a turn. They will flank you and they will kill you. And then, like, I think the best thing I can say about XCOM 2 is that there are very, very few situations that I've not felt like any failure in a mission is my fault. Even with that random number generator, slight irritation, the number of times that it feels like you take a 90% chance shot that would absolutely kill them, and either it misses completely or you graze and get minimum damage, so that like the number of enemies that are left on 1 unit of health, like one blob of health, who then go on to dominate you, like is just embarrassing.
This is really stressing me out.
Do you know what? I've got the word stressful written down. And part of this is that's all XCOM. That's the first XCOM. That's XCOM 2. War of the Chosen basically pushes XCOM 2 further, and it gives you like, as well as just generally trying to thwart the aliens, it gives you 3 mini bosses. Who are the Chosen, and this is the War of the Chosen, and this is the grammatical issue I have. It's war against the Chosen. We are fighting the Chosen. The Chosen, they sass each other, and they are like, this, like, my sister's a bit rubbish. But they're not, like, actually at war with each other. They're at war with me. Like, come on, pay attention to me, XCOM. I'm the real star here. So, and that's one of my gripes.
I'm really glad you get that out. That's great. That's okay.
Good. It's important to work all of this out. The other, like, a slightly more serious gripe I have with it is, so the sort of, in the missions, everything is turn-based. In the sort of, like, in your, it's called the Avenger. It's like a big floating sort fortress that you can, like, dig out. It's like basically a recaptured alien machinery, where you can, over the course of the game, you dig out the different like rooms within it to use for your own purposes, and it's like your base. You move it around the world, and you scan, like you go to certain sites and you scan, and that's how time progresses, and that's how missions pop up. That's how you make decisions about what you want to focus on. Do you want to get supplies over here? Do you want to find some more recruits over here? Do you want to just go to one of the resistance headquarters and like heal up because everybody's nearly dead? And all of that sort of all of that is peppered with these random events that will sort of pop up. And this is where one of my slight gripes comes, because it's supposed to be something, it's all about resource management. It's about choosing where you deploy your resources at what time. If you go on a mission, if everybody survives, if everyone's got shot, they're injured and they're out for a certain number of days. That's, again, very RNG heavy. It doesn't seem to matter too much whether you get hit really hard or hit lightly. That will affect whether you're described as lightly wounded, or gravely wounded. But the number of days is completely random. You know, there's people who are lightly wounded for 14 days, and there's people who are gravely wounded for 5. It's a bit odd, but it means that they're out. And as you're
does ACL out for 3
yeah. It's pretty much it. It's like you get winged. Even wearing the best armor, you get winged, and it's like, oh, that's me for a good. Oh, the wife's going on holiday actually, so I think that's me for 2 weeks. Yeah. So, and the squad, they level up. They go from rookie. Why rookie, not private? Everything else is military ranks. That's another one of my gripes. You go from rookie to squaddy. No one's ever referred to anyone as a squaddy. Like, what is that about?
Like somebody goes on like a stag do type Beta or something.
Yeah. And to be fair, they shoot about as well as a week on the town. So, and that's like some of the ridiculousness comes from the shots where it's like you are 2 tiles away from someone with a shotgun, and literally if they miss, you can tell they're going to miss because they go like that. Because they can't have someone actually hit. And that was great for your listeners.
Podcast, that's fine, it's okay.
That was me pointing at the ceiling instead of aiming at Fazz. So again, more gripes. The sort of the random nature of the missions does mean that you've got sort of the illusion of choice. Because you get to choose certain things that happen, but it was very, very irritating. Some of the things are self-directed, so some of the missions are you have to go and make a decision about what you're doing at the time that you want to do it. Some of them just pop up randomly, and you can guarantee when you make the decision to go and do something and you have a horrendous mission that wipes out 3 of your most experienced soldiers, 2 seconds later, there'll be a mission that's like, oh, Commander, we've got an opportunity to hit supply lines. And you go, we are not ready for this. Ignore. And it just comes up with a pop-up. It's like, you really shouldn't do that. You really should ignore this mission. It's like, okay, I guess I'll do that mission.
Yeah.
But it does, and it comes back to that word stressful. It felt a little bit like being at work and trying to manage your inbox. It was the number of things that was going on. It was like, do you want to do this or this? I don't know. There's 3 resistance factions in War of the Chosen that sort of balance out the sort of mini boss element of it. And then each one of them has got their own needs that, you know, it's like, oh, come and help us carry some boxes or something because we can't do that.
We need to move a sofa.
Yeah, it's pretty much we need to move a sofa, and if you don't do it in 7 turns, it will be destroyed. Right? That's the kind of nonsense that happens.
I'm not choosing to move sofas.
Yeah.
That email's getting left in the inbox.
But that's the thing. But it's like you say, actually, I can't deal with that right now, and your boss gives you a raise being like, actually, you really need to move that sofa. Like, you could not, but it would be really catastrophically bad for you. And I think that's the other like genuine complaint about it, was there were a couple of times that I failed missions, lost squad members. And not only do you fail the mission and not get the rewards, often you're sort of punished for failing the mission as well. So you'll lose the support of a region, or you will lose, or the aliens will like kind of massively increase their count towards their big bad that they're trying to implement. And it just it's a little bit all or nothing.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating, and it's like I tried not to, but there was a couple of times I had to save scum. And I had to go back to previous save games that I had, because it automatically saves at every turn if you're not in Iron Man mode. And there was a couple of times I had to go back, so it was like there was a complete catastrophe of random nonsense.
sofas.
Right? Well, the example of a sofa is usually it's like supply crates rather than a sofa, but let's say it's a sofa because that's funnier. The sofa that I was trying to hack is in like a truck, and it's like this sofa is going to self-destruct in 5 turns. In fact, this would be a much better. I might do a mod that just changes them all to sofas, and because of completely unpredictable things around enemies exploding, fires catching, and fire destroys the environment at a seemingly random rate. I'm sure there is a rule to it, but you can never really tell when something's about to blow and when it's not.
Yeah.
So there was a couple of times that it was like I was fiercely fighting off aliens and like still had 5 turns to go, and the sofa would explode. And then it's like, oh, cool. Not only do you not get the engineer that you needed to help you clean out some of the other rooms, but also now Mexico's pissed off with you, and we're all really disappointed in you. And also, 5 of your squad are now injured, and they've all taken a bump on the shin and they're out for 4 weeks. What am I gonna do? So it's irritating. It's That's another one of my gripes.
Yeah, it really feels like this is bad for the emotions.
It's stressful. It is really, really stressful. And the other main gripe I have about it is around progression as well, because you start out. War of the Chosen gives you a whole bunch of extra tools that aren't in XCOM 2 normally. So it gives you squad cohesion. It gives you every squad member has a different every one of your squad has a different kind of level of cohesion that they have, like how well they get on with their squad mates. And if you pair them together with ones that they will increase their bonds, and that bond will increase faster if they get on. And then when that levels up, you get cool things like at the first level, you can one squad member can sacrifice one of their actions to give their bond mate another action, which has literally saved some of my squad members' lives. When it's you get a bad RNG roll, and it's like, I just really need to shoot this alien again with a shotgun, or I am toast next turn.
Yeah.
You can do the whole, you got this, buddy, across the battlefield, and shoot again. So that's quite useful. But the problem with it is this RNG problem, which is you are so beholden to it, and it is so all or nothing. Because we're not talking you don't have to get hit very many times before your more experienced squad members are toast.
Yeah.
And if they are toast, they're gone. That's it. You don't get them back.
Permadeath.
It's permadeath, and you have to get someone else to step in and fill that role. But it meant, certainly for me, it meant I emphasized the traits that increased minimum damage and increased accuracy above all others. Because I ended up in a situation where the only time you would be comfortable taking a risk was if it was 100% chance to hit, and the minimum damage would be enough to take out the enemy.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Which meant, even though there are these choices, there's 4 different character classes, plus later on you can get psychic operatives, and you've got 3 resistance groups. Mm-hmm. For each of them, they've got a couple of different skill trees that you can go down. But I ended up just basically having a bunch of rangers that were really good with blades, because you can get that to basically 100% all the time, and you can add minimum damage to it. So only one type of them. Snipers that are all gunslingers, because every mission has a time limit. Nobody's got any time for snipers, because if you move, you can't shoot. So there are very few missions where you can just sit there. So I went down the sort of pistol firing route with them, etc. Like Grenadiers, it was all about shredding armor, and there were some really powerful things that you could have got them to do with kind of chaining shots together and things like that. But all of them was minus 15% chance to hit. Absolutely not. Never gonna hit. So what's the point? But then when it comes off, and when you do land a difficult shot, it feels really good. But then you come back to that question I asked at the start, which is was this me, or was this the game deciding it would be really cool if you hit?
Yeah.
And that sort of that undercooked it a little bit for me. And the other thing I've written down here is, when you lose somebody in combat, it's a little bit like Pokemon, because there's not that many character classes. But imagine if every time you lost Charizard in combat, you came back with a Charmeleon, except instead of naming him Steve, he was now called Sven, and he had a Swedish accent. That's sort of what it feels like. You just have to go to the next person of that rank. And it feels like the progression is sort of backwards. You spend, I mentioned about the bond mates and everything like that. You spend so much time at the start working out who goes with who's on the same wavelength, who's going to be compatible. Let's build a squad that has like kind of this person can do this and she can do this and all that kind of stuff. And then within about 3 or 4 missions, you're like, right, okay, you're alive on the Sky Ranger. You're not gravely injured in the shin. Get on the Sky Ranger. 5 snipers, fine. Yeah, we've got 3 turns to go and to go and recover this thing before it explodes. Like this, it's not a sofa. Don't worry, guys. It's just a bedside cabinet.
Get the Sky Ranger.
It literally is. It's like who's the next man up. It's because you don't have that many. Yeah. So that's probably irritating. And probably the most damning thing, I didn't quite finish War of the Chosen, but I have finished XCOM 2 before. Mm-hmm. And probably the most damning thing I can say about it is in the final mission of XCOM 2, I stumbled across a bug. I stunned a big, horrible alien muton warrior. And then something in the game went wrong, where from then on the alien's turn, all it would do was the camera would flip to that like stunned muton, and then it would just go, your turn. So all the aliens would like react when you saw them and run for cover, but then when it was actually their turn, they wouldn't do anything. They wouldn't shoot, they wouldn't move, they wouldn't do anything. And I was just like, that's fine. I'll take that, because it felt like me against the game rather than me against the aliens.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. And having said all that, and knowing that I've prattled on for a long time about this, having said all of that, I could not stop playing it.
Yeah.
I really could not stop playing it. It was the actual, the turn-based missions, like the music is epic. It's like when your squad selection music, I describe it to my wife as, it's like the music they put on NFL Red Zone before it comes on. It's that kind of like, all right, okay, we're going. And the mission loading, like the loading screen is you're in the Sky Ranger, it's got the mission objectives there. And then when the loading is complete, it's like the jump light will go on.
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah.
Nice.
And there's the animation of everybody just like kind of coming down the Sky Ranger. Everyone looks badass. And when it works, like, you level up the equipment, and you're taking on these huge aliens. And when you pull off a maneuver that just like a proper flanking maneuver that just tactically works out perfectly, it feels great. So yeah, I'm really sort of torn with it.
Yeah. At war with yourself.
I war with myself
against,
unlike the Chosen, against the Chosen, who are not at war with each other. Yeah, and the Chosen themselves, like they're like all that stuff. It's a really good addition. It does expand out the gameplay, gives you more things to fight against, but also more rewards as well. You've got the ability to do a lot more stuff. But it does feel a little bit like opening your inbox after you've been away for 2 weeks. Like, if you've ever bought a game on deep discount that you've not played before with all the DLC, and the first time you open that game, it's like, hey, you can now do this thing, and this thing, and this thing. It's like, I don't even know how to walk yet. Like, can you give us 2 minutes? It feels like that for the first, 2 months of gameplay. Yeah, I think I've covered everything there.
Yeah, cool. It definitely doesn't sound like my type of game, but... it feels like an equivalence to the most recent type of game that I've played of that is like Final Fantasy Tactics, almost in a way.
Yeah.
And I really found myself frustrated with that, but really compelled to play it as well. Similar sort of feel, but yeah, that sounds like I say, just the stress levels. I just can't handle it. I when it comes to gaming, I just need to be sort of walking around happy, not put upon by sofa throwing mutons.
We Rich and I play D&D with a guy called Jack, and he likes XCOM, but he has to turn the time limits off, and he plays with multiple snipers so that he can deliberately move very slowly. But the game is very good at making you take those risks and then feel like an absolute numpty when you take them, because the one time you push it is always the time. It's like you stumble across 2 groups of aliens at the same time and they muller you.
For a podcast deep cut, this is why Jack's George Foreman grill is so dirty because he's spending too much time playing XCOM.
Or Factorio.
That is a deep cut. And also the Factorio thing is definitely true.
Cool. You got a score out of 10, then a torn score.
yeah.
I do have a score.
arbitrary score.
I know it's arbitrary, and I know this is not how you normally do it. I'm curious what you guys think I'm going to say after that.
Oh, all right.
It's like another
it's not
free
going to change
play,
my mind.
another free play option. I don't know. I think that the Haikers doth protest too much. I always feel like you're knowing you as I do. I think that you have an eloquence and a great poetry to your gripes, and you sell them really, really well, and they're really great to listen to. But in the end, they're always sound larger than what they are. So I'm gonna say I'd go for around about 7.
Yeah, I think we're heading towards 7 or 8 town. He says scroll.
What happens in 7 or 8 town?
I don't really know, if I'm being honest. I sort of...
It stays in 7 or 8 times.
My mistake was
good.
starting to scroll through our spreadsheet of scores while I was talking, and then I realised I was saying words that I hadn't anticipated.
The schools are quite nice. Like
See,
the postman.
that's exactly that kind of autopilot that gets you killed in XCOM.
Yeah, well,
it's I just want to say, I'll go and take that cover. Oh, wait, that's further forward than everything else. Oh, cool, great. That's a new alien I haven't seen. That's pretty, and it's eaten me.
Yeah, to be honest with you,
Or
that's
mind-controlled
probably why
arbitraries.
I've never lasted more than about 2 hours playing any of the XCOMs. Like I've always bounced off them.
Yeah.
Um,
I think it does. Do you know what? And sorry, this was the other thing I wanted to say, and I know I'm going on for ages, but the other thing I wanted to say about it is the War of the Chosen. It sounds like a stupid thing. It gives you the ability to do posters after successful missions, which is like literally, it's like weirdly involved. And it like you put together like your squad going like, "Hey, great job, thumbs up!" Like screw the aliens.
That's like definitely now,
At a point
7
on.
or 8.
Yeah.
That's great. I love that idea.
There's a more serious point that it's not just like there's that and therefore it's a 10. But they like
don't know.
another weirdly existential thing it did is like permadeath. In XCOM 1 and base XCOM 2, I had a habit of being like, oh, but that person was really useful. Like, actually, let's just go back and, like, find what I don't care if someone else dies, but I don't want them to die. XCOM 2, because if someone dies, there is a button that you can click to memorialize them, and that puts a poster together, which is like basically like we fight in their name or something like that, and then that starts popping up around like some of the
Really?
different
That's so
cities and things
cool.
like
That's
that.
kinda cool.
And it actually, genuinely, it sounds stupid, but it made it easier for me to cope with the fact that it was like.
they didn't die in vain.
But like literally, like that's the sort of feeling. It's that like it just reminds you. It's like this is supposed to be a game of challenge and overcoming challenges. And it was like, oh, okay, right, no, okay, fine, we'll cope. It wasn't a disaster. The mission passed. We'll go with it. And it just gave me almost like the validation to go, no, just accept it and move on. Not because I was like sad about them dying, but because it was just like, no, okay,
Because
this
the
is
creative
supposed
on the
to,
posters look good.
Sven, no!
it's part of the game and it's supposed to be part of the game.
Yeah.
So
That's cool.
sorry, that was just another random thought that came
They
up.
were both wonderful asides that
Yeah.
made me feel pretty good at the end there.
That's good. So I had it as an 8.
Okay.
And largely, I did originally have it as a 6 or a 7, and then I played Brutal Legend, and I was like, no, that game is made. This game is a game that, like, legitimately my first choice for the free play, I couldn't play because I spent so much time being like, I am going to beat this game. I am going to get further into XCOM, and just one more mission was strong.
And that, to be honest, I think that stands for a lot when it comes to grading these games. For me personally, it's almost like I've said it a few times now, where it's like you'll pick loads of things wrong with a game and then go, but I cannot stop playing it. And that's
That was it.
I am entertained, and that's what matters, I guess.
Yeah,
really.
yeah, definitely. To be honest with you, like, just going back to Duke Nukem Forever, like, I probably would have scored it slightly higher for that exact reason as well.
Okay.
It's like, I could have stopped playing it whenever I damn well liked.
Yeah.
And yet I didn't. So
For the pod!
yeah. If only I was so noble. Freedom Wars, everyone.
Freedom Wars.
On the old PS Vita.
So,
Lovely.
in the news at the moment,
Yeah.
I know nothing of Freedom Wars, or didn't, I guess, until I saw that everyone was hyped. Well,
Yeah.
everyone on a couple of subreddits was super excited.
12 people were
about
really hyped.
No, there was a few people. I love when it's on Reddit. It's like, oh, this many people are online or whatever and stuff, and it's like you kind of go to certain subreddits, like one person's been online about the last 3 years. It's just like the Vita one's pretty busy, to be honest.
Yeah. So yeah, we are getting Freedom Wars back, and that was a bit of a surprise.
Which is what you were fighting for all along.
I don't know if I was, but it's one of those games that like a lot of the other PS Vita heavy hitters, such as they were, like Tearaway or Gravity Rush and stuff like that, all kind of had life after the Vita. Freedom Wars is one of the ones that kind of conspicuously didn't.
Yeah.
And I think Soul Sacrifice is another one that's popped up since they've announced Freedom Wars, where a load of other people have said, well, could we maybe do this one as well?
Just while you're at it. Like, is it like the game developers just got it in the back pocket? Like, oh yeah, that one, yeah.
Well, I mean, what was kind of interesting about this as well is this notion that they've basically licensed out the IP so that they can, like, a different company can go and put Freedom Wars out on their behalf. Which has prompted a load of other speculation about, like, well, what else might Sony license out to other people? My personal favourite, the notion of Sega doing a Wipeout game. Yeah, exactly, right? So,
Stop the pod, that's all I want now.
Yeah, exactly. Like, go to Reddit, rampantly speculate. It's fine. My job here is done. But, yeah, Freedom Wars. It's dystopian as hell. So... basically, everybody, and I'm going to get this wrong, right? Basically, everybody, when they're born, is born, by and large, with a sentence, like a prison sentence, of a million years.
Not just weird countdown.
How well formed?
Not a grammar problem again. And the idea is that you have to serve the panopticon where you are living by going and basically doing a kind of Monster Hunter thing. And you're given these missions, you go do the mission, you get years taken off of your life sentence of a million years. And eventually you can get upgrades, you can move up the rankings a little bit, you can take on bigger jobs that will take more off of your sentence. You can gather resources while you're in these missions and either use them to, build more stuff or donate them to the panopticon. God, that word is going to be difficult to say by the end of this.
I insist that you say it
every
single time.
God. And you can basically
Panar.
you can use these resources to donate and get even more time taken off. The flip side is that you basically have to get points together to get more freedoms, if you like. So when you first start, you kind of can't even leave your cell. You have to apply for a permit to leave. Okay. You have to apply for a permit to run for more than 5 seconds. You have to apply for a permit to stand still for longer than a handful of seconds. You have to apply for a permit to talk to people.
Things?
You
Hopping. Hop everywhere.
Crazy taxi hop everywhere.
Everybody's basically got this, like, they call them accessories. So they have a robot that basically just follows them around and monitors everything you do until you can afford the permit to go off without them.
to just give your robot 50 quid and just be like, just go to the cinema.
Basically. And it's a really expensive perk as well. Like, you really got to earn it.
How much does Couch to 5K cost?
I shudder to think.
Don't talk about couches.
I shudder to think. What is kind of cool is whenever you get like one of these permits, or you are given like a fine, I guess, you have to, like, instead of signing your name anywhere, you have to put your fingerprint on the screen, which obviously you're not actually doing. You are just pushing a bit of the touchscreen, but it puts a little print on there and all that. And you do have that little, like, okay, that is kind of a nice touch.
Sony's got your genetic.
I assume it's a picture they put up. And so, yeah, like, the whole thing kind of sits somewhere between, like, Monster Hunter, like Attack on Titan and Gears of War and Spider-Man and stuff like that. So you go into a mission, you can choose from like melee weapons or ranged weapons, you can switch between them, you get your items like grenades and medkits and all that kind of stuff. But you also have these things called thorns, and you can use them to like fire at a wall and then fling yourself up and like attach to it and shoot from there, or climb on these giant like not quite robot, not quite organic kind of entities that try and abduct civilians and things like that and hack away at them and all that. So it's weirdly fun to get around. It's a little bit clunky because it was 2014 when it came out, and it's a handheld console, so it's never going to be completely flawless. But it's engaging enough. With the default controls, it was a bit much to get my head around what was going where.
Yeah.
They had plenty of options, and one of them was much more like what you would expect, like a third-person shooter to control, in 2024.
Mm-hmm.
So I switched to that and settled in quite nicely. So this is kind of the disclaimer bit, because I actually still had my original save file from back in the day.
How many games
So-
on the podcast have you? Is that actually
you
been
know
the
what?
case?
I was just about to say, I
Probably
like these
quite a few.
episodes where Rich has got his
Yeah.
saves.
Like, so I had my old save, so I didn't
He's going to
actually.
tell us about a bus somewhere now. Right?
Well, I didn't start the game from scratch. I didn't start the fire either. I didn't have a permit, but I did dip back in, and it took me a little while to find my feet again and all that kind of stuff, because it wasn't like it was forthcoming with objectives or anything like that. So say you finish a mission and then your accessory person will say such and such wants to speak to you in the Warren, which is a different part of this panopticon, which is fine. But then if you save it, you're not going to get that reminder again. Which after a gap of when was the last time I played this? It must have been probably at least 8 years ago, something like that. It was like, okay, what the fuck was I about to do? So you do get markers and stuff like that in the world, but you've got to be you've got to see it in the world. It's not like you can switch to the map and it just has a giant arrow or something like that. Point is that there's a bunch of these little things that you can imagine that in a updated re-release version are exactly the kind of things they might look at and go, well, actually, nowadays we could probably fix that and review that. So you can you go into a lot of these missions with allies who also have their own accessories. So you end up with a group of about 8 of you, piling into these battles and all that kind of stuff, which is kind of fun. I can imagine that if you were playing it multiplayer back in the day, it would have been where it really shone.
Yeah.
I really can. As it is, it's fine, but you kind of it's that level of AI where you get the impression they're not actually really doing a hell of a lot to help you. You might occasionally see some of them shooting at an enemy, which is great, but it's not very often. So I ended up just switching a load of mine to just heal. I was like, what, just keep me alive. I'll do all the murders. That's fine. I'll do the murders, and let's do it that way.
And ironically, that kept adding time onto your sentence.
Well, basically, but it's got a story. It's got a larger narrative to it. But I wasn't massively engaged. Granted, I was coming back to it after we'll call it 8-year gap. So it was difficult to pick up the thread. Not impossible. I managed to get into it again reasonably easily, but at the same time, it wasn't the reason for going and playing it really. The gameplay's fun. It's fine, and it plays perfectly well. It looks great. It's got good bones, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. I can absolutely see why some bright spark somewhere was actually, what would do with a bit of spit and polish and could fly. And I think they might be onto something. Yeah. So I know we've had discussions before now about whether or not the definitive version of a game could be on a different console. It feels like this is waiting for a definitive version. Okay. It feels primed and ready for it. Yeah. One where you've got an online crowd playing it. You can spruce up the visuals a little bit more. Hopefully add a little bit more variety to some of the missions and the areas that you do them in and stuff like that. Because you've got things like escort missions or ones that almost play more kind of capture the point and deathmatch type things.
Yeah.
But again, that sort of point capture thing, at least the one I played recently, took place in an area called the Cell Garden, which is basically just block forts in square rooms. It's I see why you've done it, because if you are playing that in like a big multiplayer, it means that it can run properly.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you were doing it nowadays, you would hope they would do something a little bit more, engaging with it and exciting.
They need to do something with it, really, to probably make it feel like that.
Yeah, I think if they trotted it out in its current state, I could see why people who loved it back in the day would continue to love it, because it is a good game. I haven't gelled with it personally. I also haven't bounced off it. But at the same time, weirdly, for all of its faults, I was playing Duke Nukem Forever more than I was playing this, right? And I don't know what that says about me. I shudder to think what it says about me. But it's the kind of game that, like, I think if you were looking at it objectively, you could go, yes, that is a good game. If I'm looking at it subjectively, I'm like, yeah, I get it. It's just not for me. And I mean, it looks great. It's got a really, like, there's something about the art style that is kind of appealing. It's sort of like the kind of more recent anime fighters and like Genshin Impact kind of sort of drawn art style. But not quite sticking the landing. But you know, there's something there. So I'm glad it'll get a new audience. Yeah, I guess is the short version. And it's fun. There's something that kept me at a distance from it though. Like it's not quite there for me. I don't know if it's just because the sort of slight fiddliness of some of the movement, which when it's giving you what is effectively a literal grappling hook to like pull giant robots down or fling yourself on walls, like it feels like it could be more fluid somehow or less clunky, or like the shooting's kind of light and there's not much impact or feedback from the combat or anything like that. So there's lots of little things like that were just like, yeah, I've just wanted that little bit more from it, just that little extra sort of special sauce that wasn't quite there. So yeah, I mean, I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10, but that's for me personally. I can absolutely see why somebody would have played that.
It's still pretty good score though.
Oh, it's absolutely, absolutely. And I could see, like, it would be a recommendation if anybody was either interested or played it back in the day, and it has one eye on the sort of updated version as it comes out. Like, yep, fill your boots. I'm sure you'll have a great time with it, unless they completely screw it up somehow. But even if you just picked up a Vita and went back and played it, there's still something there for you. It's just not for me personally. But somebody else would easily give it an 8 or a 9, happily.
It's interesting that I saw some of the comments were like, oh, this game's finally been released from the Vita almost. And I'm like, you can get a PlayStation TV or a Vita and play it, right? Like, isn't it? Or I guess if you have that feeling in the first place, therefore you must feel really fondly about it, and you probably already have a Vita, or you've kept a Vita and stuff. It's almost like, I think it feels like people want to share it with the wider world, maybe.
I think so. I think there's part of that, and I tell you what, like it's a big game. Like I'm not gonna bullshit anybody. Like, I haven't played far enough through it to be completely confident that the narrative doesn't suddenly fire on all cylinders and absolutely hammers it home. But I don't think it's necessarily. It feels like a bit of a slow burn, right? Narratively, at least for the bits that I've played. So yeah, I think I'm kind of with them, that it's nice that it'll go forth, and hopefully, like, someone new will find it and appreciate it. Yeah. You never know. Like, if it does well, maybe they'll do a sequel and all that kind of stuff. It feels like the kind of thing where they wanted to do like a bit of a wider universe, maybe, because you can go in and say, oh, well, my panopticon is London, or my panopticon is Hong Kong, and all that kind of stuff. So you can see that, if they scaled that up on a global thing, and you could do a lot of interesting things with it. So it's got a lot of potential, I guess. It's the short version.
At least your game didn't lie to you like me and Hakers. Mine didn't have any wars at all. Yeah. And Hakers was lying about how you fight a war. So, like, at least it was truthful.
Yeah, you know where you stand with a 1,000,000-year life sentence.
you really do. Like, and then if you stand there too long, then you get punished for it.
You get more years put on.
Yeah, exactly. That's fair.
That's exactly right.
We all know that's
that's the most fascinating part of that for me.
Yeah.
The whole, like, if you stand still, then you're guilty of idleness. Again, it sounds. I mentioned in the last pod, Demolition Man. This sounds very similar to Demolition Man with the fine and putting the thing.
Yeah, and it does a lot of good, like, good trade in, like, kind of dystopian lingo as well, and it's pretty dense on terminology that it's given to things. And there's a lot to like about it. There really is.
I would watch a film set in that
Yes.
universe based on
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
just
yeah.
on my description.
Yeah. Some sort of manga, maybe. Yeah. That'd
Yeah,
be good.
exactly. Yeah, bit of a series type thing. Yeah, I could totally see something like that working.
Cool. I think that brings to end the 2 podcast run with Haikers. So thanks for joining us for those, dude. Really appreciated your
Thanks for
in-depth
having us.
analysis. It was really good.
Is that code for you talked for frickin' ages?
No, it isn't. No. I would just tell you that is the case. No, it was genuine, genuine love. But yeah, we always enjoy having guests on, having great takes and stuff. So as we do, you guys listen to us. So thank you very much, and we'll speak to you next time.
Cheers.
Cheers.